Bard on the Plains podcast with Mike McPeak. It's about stories, mine and yours.
Hello everyone, I'm back with a new episode. I have kind of taken a breather with the Wuhan virus going around right now. Thankfully my job wasn't impacted too much. I've been able to put in all my time that I've needed to and get the paycheck that we need to keep going. But I just wasn't quite in the mood to record. But now that we see how this is unfolding and hopefully we're starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, it's given me a little time to pause and think about things a little bit. And one of the things I have thought about is, for us right now, this is serious, and it, we took it seriously. Hopefully, we've done the right things. Hopefully, it'll all work out. And and it may affect the economy. It will probably hurt a few people, maybe more than we'd like to think along the way. But we're going to come out of this, and what it's kind of reminded me of is stories that my folks used to tell, because they were born in the mid 1910s, and so my dad's birthday would have been about a month ago, and he would have been 105 at the time, so if he was still alive. But now, it's got me thinking about the stories that they told about growing up, because they would have been teenagers in the 30s when the Great Depression was going on. And they would tell me stories about different things that would happen then. They would, one of the stories that they would tell me is that when my mom was going to school, because she only made it through the 8th grade, but when she was going to school, they would send a lunch tour to the one-room country schoolhouse that she would go to. And she would say one of the sandwiches that her mom would send with her would be a goose lard sandwich. Well, nowadays we would be looking at that going, oh my, because that's a lot of grease, that's a lot of starch. Dietary thinking wasn't the same back then as it is now. Back then it was like, this will be a good hearty meal for you. It'll, give you some calories. It'll give you some other things that you need to keep going. But that was a consideration that they had. Another thing that they did, since South Dakota is not known for being a heavily wooded state, and back in the 30s there was not a lot of trees here natively, and so in order to have heat to heat the house with, they would have to go out to the barn and get hay and tie it into a nice tight knot, so it would burn nice and slow. And that's how they would heat the house, because they wouldn't be able to find enough wood for the wood-burning stove. Or sometimes they would go out and have to get cow pies or cow chips, otherwise known as manure, dried manure, and they would bring that up in the house and burn. It would give you a nice slow burn if it was dry enough. But that was the kind of things that they had to do to survive during that. And supposedly the hay tying is how one of the towns in South Dakota by the name of Hayti got its name, was from these knots that people made to burn to try to heat their houses with. But there was other things that they dealt with, because my dad, as I've mentioned before on this podcast, joined the Civilian Conservation Corps and went out to the Black Hills and did a lot of work out there, because there was not enough money for him to stay at home and help with the farm. So he did that, and he got valuable experience along the way, and he picked up a lot of stories that he would tell us about things. But these were all compromises that these people had to make to survive, and they learned to deal with it, and they came out of it. And I think they came out of it stronger. I think if they hadn't gone through these experiences, this country might not be the same as it is now, because of what they learned then and what they passed along to me. Is that you don't take things for granted. You try to reuse, reclaim, recycle, and repurpose everything. I know we would buy these buildings, or we'd buy a farmstead, and we'd tear the buildings down. We'd save the lumber to build other buildings. One of the buildings at home on the farm was parts of a potato storage building that had come from Vienna. I was too young to help with it at the time, but my dad and my brothers went over there. They tore this building down, they reclaimed the lumber, and they used it to build what we call the sheep shed on the farm at home. And Dad would even have me out there straightening nails because he was saving them. And I know him and I got into a lot of arguments about this because it was really tedious work to try and straighten these nails. And if you've ever tried to straighten a nail and reuse it, it doesn't really go too well. It'll just want to bend again. So like I say, we had lots of arguments about that. But I look back on that, and he's taught me a lot of things. Both my folks have taught me a lot of things about what it takes to survive and make something of yourself as you go forward with life. My mom, when she was a teenager, I think somewhere in her teens, she went out, or maybe early 20s, she went out to Michigan to work, to get work out there because there's nothing here in South Dakota for her. And so she lived in Michigan for several years. That's where she met her first husband. And they were married and had one child and another child on the way when he died in a car accident. But these were all adversities that, she had to overcome. And, she came back here, met my dad, started a whole new family along with the two kids that she had. But these were the experiences that made them. So I'm hoping that as we look back on what we're going through now, and I just get the feeling that it's going to be serious. I'm not trying to downplay this any way whatsoever. But as we go through this and learn things, I'm hoping that we will, get experiences from here that make us better. Certainly, washing your hands is not a bad thing to do. Covering your mouth when you cough. And also, just try to be a little bit more considerate of people too. If you feel like you're sick, stay home. If your employer gives you grief about that, maybe, if possible, you should look for a different employer. But, and things about, maybe we should be looking at how we deal with illnesses, and maybe we need to look at our medical complex and make decisions there about maybe possibly doing things differently. But like I say, I think this the death toll for this isn't as bad as what they were predicting at the beginning of this. And certainly, as President Trump had said, even losing one life is terrible. But what they were predicting is not what it's turned out to be. And so I hope that we can get some experience from this, that we can make our lives better personally and the country's experience better, and just come out of this as a stronger nation. Because you look at those people that came out of my parents' generation. They went through the Great Depression, and then they went through World War II. And, they had other trials along the way. But I think that actually made them stronger and better because they knew how to deal with adversity. They didn't sit there and I'm not discounting the fact that therapy helps people, but they didn't have a lot of that back then. They learned to, work through their pain and everything. And like I said, now we're more advanced. We shouldn't have to suffer mentally the way that they did then. But still, I think if we learn to take these experiences and work with them and grow with them, we're going to come out of this as a better country and better people.
If you have a story you'd like to tell, contact Mike on Twitter @BardOnThePlains or by email at bardontheplains@gmail.com. For more information about the stories in this podcast, visit bardontheplains.com.